All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Buddhist Biohacker podcast. We are live this afternoon on YouTube at Buddhist Biohacker. And for those of you who join in later on the podcast on iTunes or Spotify, welcome. And it's just an amazing time. It's an amazing day. And I have an amazing guest, Julie Hoyle, back with us again. We cannot get enough. So welcome back, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
And our topic today is a good one. It is your weird is your superpower. And I just can't wait to dive in. So I'm going to let you take it away, Julie.
Thank you, Lisa. Well, it's a thrill to be here. I can't stop smiling. And laughing. So I know we're going to have a fun time together. So welcome everybody who's here on the live stream, and welcome to everybody who joins later via the video. So as Lisa said, the theme is your weird is your superpower. And I would imagine that every single person who is listening in today or who watches the video later on feels the same way, actually, that at some point in your life, whether it was really from when you were very young or more recently, have felt a bit weird. And often, and I can speak from direct experience here, I think from as far back as I can remember, I always felt like a weirdo. I felt like I never fit in. I felt like I wasn't like the other children I knew. I felt like there was something strangely different about me, and often I couldn't articulate what that was when I was really young. And then as I grew older, I became really aware that the things that other students and friends, schoolmates were interested in didn't kind of fit or sync with where I was coming from. And that feeling actually pervaded and went through to much of my life. And it wasn't until I had a really dramatic spiritual awakening in my early 30s that I began to understand why I felt weird and why I felt different and why I felt like I didn't quite fit in to, let's call it kind of the normal perception of life. So in a way, it created a lot of conflict in me, which is why I wanted to speak to this theme this afternoon. Because unless we really come to understand what that conflict about being different is, we'll always feel separate and apart. We'll always feel that there's some kind of conflict. We'll always feel that we're afraid to be true to who we are. And the truth is, with a capital T, if you cannot be who you are, you will never realize the self. In other words, if you can't fully own and embrace and accept every aspect of who you are, the reality of who you are, then you'll always feel a disconnect. So what I'd like to do to kind of get started this afternoon is ask you either to write, take note or take a mental note of a list of things that you felt were kind of weird about you. What were your kind of weird tags or descriptors for yourself that you were, often afraid to reveal to other people, or you kept quiet about, or you wanted to try and sort of manage or contract or constrain? So just kind of give a minute, or so to that, think about that. And I'm pretty sure that every person who is listening on the live stream has got at least one or two or maybe three things Or maybe you got pages of it, I don't know.
I was going to say, I have a list for sure while folks are writing down their list. And if you're watching live on YouTube right now, I see that there's a handful of you guys watching. Do write it in the comment box. Like, I'll be happy to share it. But I know for me, two things pop into my head right away for my own weird things when I was a kid. One was I was always outside in nature with my notepad writing. And I didn't really like to be, I had, a couple close friends, but I really liked my alone time. And so I would like sneak away into the woods behind my house and like just write. Even when I was like 12 years old, littler, I would write. And I think the other weird thing is I was obsessed with the occult as a kid. So I would spend my allowance money at the bookstore, which we don't even go to bookstores anymore. But I used to go to a mall and buy books at a bookstore. And I bought these books about witches and healers. And I still have those books, actually. I've kept them all my life. But I became obsessed with trying to understand like seances and what was happening with these figures, because I saw these shadowy figures as a kid, and I saw these people standing in my doorway. And so I was like the weird kid that would do seances at slumber parties. It's like so true. And my friends would know, like, oh, we're going to do a seance. And we'd light candles and I'd like do a seance. I was like the weirdest thing. When I look back, I'm like, I wonder what my friends or what their parents even thought, but that was totally my weird.
Yes, yes. So, these things are really, really good to look at, because also what we're doing is we're honoring how, what we label as weird is actually sort of a drive or a desire in us to be able to look beyond the parameters of what we, were taught to think of as being reality.
Mhm.
So there's something in us as children that recognizes, I am not just this body and this mind and these labels that have been placed on me. Life is much more fluid and expansive than I have been taught. So, all of these kind of drives and sometimes obsessions, because I had the same thing with, wanting to do seances. I used to have my little seances with my brothers and sisters.
Oh my God, I love it.
And and we had some wild things happen in those. And then we went, I think I was in just in junior high. We started getting into doing levitation things, where we would, go around the ring and we would just have people kind of levitating up in the middle of
Oh
a
my God,
circle.
so awesome.
Um, but
All you guys watching, sorry to interrupt, but all you guys watching right now, I'm looking at you and you better write out what your weird is. I want to hear. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because look, the other thing is sometimes there's some shame attached to the weird, because we don't feel like we quite fit in and we're outside what we call the norm. This, even if we've got like this drive or desire to follow into the unknown or the mysteries, there's a bit of guilt or shame, especially if we come from a Catholic background where we're really taught to only listen to the teachings of a priest or what it says in the Bible, or or those kinds of things. So it's really, really important to look at that, from childhood, and to get really clear about what it was that was really driving those desires. And another thing that happened that I didn't realize until much later, that it was really a gift in and of itself, was that I think I must have been really either 7 or 8. I was quite old by school, primary school standards or junior school standards, to learn to tell time. I could not, for the life of me, tell time. And I remember that, I think it was in the first year of junior school, when I would have been 7 or 8, my teacher said, "Hey, Julie, my watch isn't working. Can you please go, into the hallway and, look at the clock and then come back and tell me what the time is?" So I knew he was setting me up. I could read time when it was on, like noon, or it was like 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock. That was easy. It was the divisions that I just couldn't get my head around. I really struggled with. So I went into the hallway, stood staring at the clock, couldn't read the time at all. And I waited for another student to come by and turned around and then said, "Hey, what time is it?" And he said, "There's a clock behind you. It's 20 minutes, it's 20 past 10. So then I went back to tell the teacher, "Oh, it's 20 past 10. And he kind of looked at me as if to say, yeah, I don't believe it." And then I remember that my mother actually took some time, and for her to take time with us kids was huge because there were 6 kids. And she went out and bought one of those kind of cardboard clocks where you can spin the hands around, and teach time. And she sat down with me and tried to teach me time, like, in quarters and so on, so that I knew what 10:15 was, or 20 minutes to 11 and all of that. And I couldn't for the life of me get it. And what happened was I labeled myself as being a slowpoke when it came to numbers and math. And that, I must have been dense, I must be dumb, I'm a real slow, poke. And that I really lived up to that self-appointed descriptor, because all the way through middle and high school, I was lousy at math. And it wasn't until I had this dramatic spiritual awakening in 1989 that I began to realize, oh my gosh, the reason I had so much difficulty telling time is because since childhood, I existed outside of time. And since childhood, I was in the habit, and I still do it now. If somebody says to me, what's the date today? I literally have to start with, okay, what year is it? Okay, it's 2020. What kind of phase of the year or part of the year is, this is spring or summer or whatever it is. And then track down month and then the day. And that's because since I was a child, I used to have, out-of-body experiences, dream visitations from great beings. Would have lucid experiences. I'd have experiences where in the waking state, I'd be saying, wait, is this a lucid dream? And I'm dreaming that I'm awake, or am I awake having a dream? So the definitions, if you like, or the parameters between the different states was always really fluid for me. And so trying to contain it within time was extremely difficult. I eventually learned how to tell time and, and all of that. But, at the time, I didn't really have any understanding about why it was so difficult. And the thing is that for everybody listening on the live stream or, watching the videos later, we've all had those direct experiences of being outside of time and seeing and experiencing directly that, you're more than the mind, the body, and, your definitions. And those experiences often show up, and it showed up, with me in a very direct way because of not being able to tell time. And it also shows up for people, who have these perceptions or these intuitions or these direct messages, or like you, Lisa, you could see spirits, or, you had this desire or drive to, have seances. So, all of these kinds of experiences are real indicators to all of us from a very, very early age that we are life itself, consciousness itself, the supreme self, which is outside of time. Time is a part of it, is its contracted kind of aspect of it. But, we've all had these really direct experiences of being what the yogis call the supreme self. That is our true nature. And what we've tried to do is, we've tried to constrain those experiences because of fear of being different, fear of being thought of as being weird, concerned about what would happen if people find out, and a lot of times these kind of pointers, these direct experiences or experiences of direct seeing, are really an invitation into, enlightenment or self-realization, or whatever you want to call that which is completely free. So, it's really important to, look at your life from childhood all the way through, look at these moments that you've had that have often been pivotal. And certainly if you've had a spiritual awakening, that's really pivotal. But, all the way through, there's always these pointers that kind of just show up through it in a dream, or in this experience of seeing, or in that quality of feeling when that, there's something that is driving and directing you, for example, in a new way or in a new direction, that is calling you to step outside of the parameters of what we might call kind of normal, constrained seeing, which is a belief that, this is all there is. There's nothing more than this. I'm the mind. I need the mind. And all of
I have Raquel's writing here, so I'm going to share this, and I have a story that you just made me think of too. So Raquel's share here on the live is, as a child, I was extremely quiet. I didn't speak much, especially to people outside my family. I like to watch people and things around me, but not interact. I never fit in. I also could always feel what other people were feeling, especially if they did not like me or were turned off by my presence. That was her share.
Yes.
Here.
Yeah, and I'm getting goosebumps as she's saying that, because that was my story too, and it was probably yours as well. And what happens is when we are super sensitive and empathic and intuitive as children, and we can essentially read other people's energy, and we can read what they're feeling and often read what they're thinking. There's a part of us as a child that is afraid to, reveal that, first of all, in case we get into trouble, we've done something.
Yeah.
And so, what can happen is those kind of constraints that can start in childhood stay with us, actually, oftentimes. And then the same holds true when we come into adulthood, and we become afraid to reveal to people what we're perceiving. And obviously as an adult, that, there's time and place, but we can often miss a moment, and I've done it myself, where I've known intuitively that someone is open and receptive, but there's still been fear around actually speaking to what I'm seeing and perceiving, because of, what happened in childhood.
Well, and I think it almost goes back to the shadow work too, because I think I always took it personally when I felt like I had those empathic feelings, that they don't like me. And it probably had nothing to do with them not liking me, but you're taking it personally. And it is a predominant part of my childhood experience, is feeling not only that I don't fit in, but that nobody likes me and nobody wants to be around me. I mean, that's a real filter. Susan says she always had deja vu as a child and an early teen. So that's what she's sharing. So thank you guys for sharing, and more people are joining in. Julie, you made me think of a story when you were talking about being raised Catholic. I was also raised Catholic, and I have this great story. It just popped into my head when you were talking about this, about being weird. So I went through catechism and all those things, and was getting ready to be confirmed in the Catholic Church. And I was really uncertain because of my beliefs and what I see, about what I wanted to do. And I had the most beautiful experience with my priest, Father Lennox, and he was such an incredible man. And he was probably in his 80s even then. I mean, he was just this little old man. And so we had to meet with him before we got confirmed. And so I went to my meeting at his little house across from the church, and I sat in his home, and it felt like this very special thing to even be at his house. And he asked me, how do I feel about being confirmed? And I told him, I said, I'm really unsure about what I think. And he said something to me, it's gonna make me cry. He is so amazing. He said, I know that you can see the angels. And he said, I can see them too. And that is why I do what I do every single day. And I'll never forget that. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this then. But that acknowledgement of my weirdness, there's so much work I've seen with my own clients and my friends around all of the spiritual programming. And I am forever grateful to that moment because it allowed me to embrace Catholicism for what it truly is spiritually and not feel weird or like I'm going against my truth by being a part of that. And it just reminded me of that story.
Yeah, that is really, really beautiful because, I had the opposite experience actually in Catholic Church. One thing that does stand out is when I think I was at college at the time, actually training to be a teacher, and I came home because my uncle had passed away. And he'd passed away very suddenly. He was only 55 and he'd had, a massive heart attack. So, of course, my father was really distraught about it because it was, unexpected. And also, my father wanted to speak to me because even though I'd never directly spoken to him about what I had always seen and perceived and known and, all these experiences I'd had, he somehow intuited that was, what my kind of experience of life was. And he said to me, your Aunt Betty is completely distraught. She's, it's destroying her that your Uncle Peter's passed away in this way. And he said that one afternoon she was sitting in the sofa, she'd cried and cried and cried. They'd had the funeral and everything. And she was sitting, just trying to sort of collect herself. And she said, all of a sudden, Peter appeared in the doorway. And and then he stepped forward and then he said to her, I came to tell you that I'm okay. Everything's fine. It's okay. It's okay. And then he disappeared and left. So being a good Catholic, my Aunt Betty went and disclosed that to the priest. And the priest, his response to her was, forget it. It doesn't mean anything. It's just widow's delusion.
Ugh.
And so she was even more devastated because she just thought she'd kind of, made it up in her mind. So when my father told me that, I said to him, call her, I'm going to see her today. So I went round there and I shared some of my experiences and I told her it was true and I told her it was real and forget what the priest said. He hasn't had any experiences himself or he would not be saying that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, where's his heart really? So that really changed things for her. But, the common thread in this kind of experience, sadly, is really familiar. Especially, I think maybe things have changed now, but certainly when I was growing up and until fairly recently, I think this is a sort of a common thing that happened in the kind of the church structures because of fear around really, I think, allowing people to have a direct experience of God within their own being without having to find an intermediary such as a priest or, the church or whatever. And this really is one of the reasons I left the church when I was 14, because, I was having these out-of-body experiences with Jesus and with Mother Mary and with angels and with saints. They were incredibly powerful and just the most amazing love that I've ever felt in my life. And, I would come out of it changed.
Mm.
And then, I'd have to go and sit and listen to, priests and nuns speaking, just seemingly speaking more about hell and damnation and purgatory than the light that Jesus Christ is.
Mm.
And so, that was part of the reason that, I left the Catholic Church. And then actually later I came back around, through again, meeting really wonderful nuns some years later through St. Benedict's monastery, who they had a very different perspective and a different way of being and a different way of sharing. But, all of these things, all of these experiences that we have really, in a way, test our commitment to the truth of who we are and the truth of what we're experiencing in a direct way. And it really shows us, how committed we are to standing behind our own truth and owning it and living it, rather than trying to sort of contract it down or push it away or forget about it and sort of try and fit in. Because I know one of the things certainly that happens in the Bahamas, and has happened a lot over the years, is that, it's a Christian country, and a lot of what people are afraid of is coming outside of the community and, revealing their, let's call them psychic abilities, for want of a better term, or gifts of the spirit, because they're really afraid of what the minister might say or the priest might say. And that is a really, really big thing in the Bahamas, actually. And I've worked with a lot of people. I think things are changing a little bit now, but certainly that is definitely the way, the case. And I think it's true of a lot of people, in terms of really, owning what you're hearing and feeling inside yourself and living from that place. Because it's much easier to keep reaching for your iPad or your iPhone and, looking at what this teacher's saying or what that enlightened master's saying or what this quote is or what the other quote is, rather than actually, owning your own wisdom and living from that space, and trusting that and living true to that. That takes tremendous courage. And just recently, I think it was yesterday, I read a quote from Gangaji, who is she's a lovely Advaita teacher. She trained with Papaji. And she said something to the effect that to be true to who you are, you have to end the seeking. You have to just drop it. And the thing is that seeking has its place. It's wonderful. We've all been on, a spiritual path, and we've stayed true to it, and it's been amazing, and it gifts us with so much. But at a certain point, we are called, either through some big event or just kind of getting tired of seeking, actually is another big one. We're really called to just drop everything and to completely dive into the fullness and the silence of who we are, and to live from that space. And to really, when we do that, we bring this tremendous energy and this tremendous force into play that we formerly, and I touched on some of this when I was speaking about the shadow work, and some of that really does link to the shadow work. But the thing is that when we really put an end to the seeking, then we really are forced in a way to really own our darkness, and by extension and in turn own our light.
This brings me to a question for you, Julie. So we get to a place where it's like, okay, like I'm ready to be me, and I'm gonna go be me, and like my own direct experience is, okay, I'm gonna tell people I'm a psychic. I'm ready. I was 25. I'm like, I'm gonna do this. How do we handle the backlash that comes in you know, from that? Because I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, you step out, you say, okay, I'm these things, and suddenly people come from everywhere telling you you're not, or it's not okay, or family's upset you're saying it, or there's this sudden attack. How do you manage that then?
Well, look, I can only speak from my own sort of direct experience, which it has been the absolute opposite, actually, because and I've often said to folk, even if you walk out with a big label on your forehead saying, and I'm using your words, I'm a psychic, or I've attained this seeing, or whatever you want to call it, actually. For the most part, people won't see it unless they're ready to see it.
Mm.
They just don't. I mean, you can, and one example is that for years in Nassau, I used to be part of a meditation group and a meditation center, and we hired a room in Unity Church. So it was lovely. We would pay rent to use the space, so it would help the church out. And we would have our Wednesday evening meditation meetings. There weren't that many people, like 10 or 15 people, but it was lovely. And we did that for several years. And I think Tony and I actually, we made this like a big sign. I went and bought some foam core, and I carved out this huge, it was almost like, like a temple-like shape. Almost like a doorway into a temple shape is the only way I can just describe it. And then I put it on the wall, and then I posted information about our weekly meditation group, what time we started, little pieces of information. And that was up there, I think, for 5 or 6 years. And I cannot tell you, and the church would have their weekly services every Sunday. They'd have prayer meetings once or twice a week. They would go into this space where I got this sign, and they would have tea and cookies afterwards, or lunch on, Sunday, snacks or whatever. And I cannot tell you how many times people, when I went to church, I'd often go to church as well on Sunday, and afterwards I'd chat with people, and they would ask me no end of times, I heard you did meditation, where is that, and when is that, and so on and so forth. And I was like, there's a sign right here. But they never saw it. They never saw it.
Wow.
And it's, I think, and I think what you're saying is true too. I think there's kind of two elements to that. One is that people see what they want to see, essentially.
Yeah.
If you're not ready to wake up, you can have every sign in the universe falling on top of your head and you don't see it, or you pretend you don't see it. When you're ready to wake up, then everything is a sign, everything is a message. And certainly moving forward through phases and, the processes of waking up to who you are, everything becomes really crystal clear. And then also, I think, probably more with family members, if you have family members who are, of a sort of certain spiritual persuasion, let's say, if they're involved with the church, or they've had experiences with the church and they've really gone against the church or something, then they might be likely to kind of step forward and start saying, this isn't a good idea, you'll be judged, or, whatever their fears are that come up around that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's both kind of aspects. But look, here's the thing that I always say to people when I'm, doing online sessions and so on with them. You're not being asked to go out into the street and publicly declare, your experiences, or, you've had an awakening, or whatever it is that is happening to you. It is often not even kind of noticeable or recognizable by other people, because certainly when I had my awakening, I was still teaching. I was still, pitching up to work every day and teaching my classes and, doing all my documentation and marking and assessing and all of that. And for the most part, people wouldn't necessarily know. But there were many times when people would come to me and say things like, what is it about you? What is it? There's something different about you. Please tell me, please, I'm going to come see you. We can have a conversation. You know, they'd be asking those kind of questions. And oftentimes they would be using the vocabulary of the church. They'd say, hey, Hoyle, you know, they'd often call me by my surname, hey, Hoyle, you know, what is it? There's something about you. I can feel an anointing around you. What is it? Tell me. How, you know, how did you get that? Please, you know, come speak to me. I need to hear the voice of, you know, they'd say stuff like that, even though I hadn't necessarily had a conversation with them about awakening or anything to do with my path. And that is the reality, because what happens is, as I've said many times before, your state always does the work. Your state speaks ahead of anything you might say. So even if, you know, you're working in McDonald's, for example, or, you know, you're working in a hospital, or whatever it is you're doing, you might be talking about the weather. You might be discussing what you watch on television. But there's the place from which the words arise, the place from which they come, has been awakened to that. So you're speaking from that place. You're speaking from source, essentially, rather than the mind.
Mm.
And it's that has the capacity to initiate and awaken people to the truth of who they are, even if they don't even recognize that they are searching or they're looking for anything. And that, you know, that has proven to be true, you know, in my own experience, many times, many times. You know, I've seen it in students who really have got no kind of background, if you like, you know, to understand what this means. I've seen it in the work I do with clients online. I've seen it in, you know, people that I've become friends with, because the grace of the path and the awakening power becomes active in you, and that cannot help but awaken other people. That is the point and the purpose. You know, and the reason that this topic is so important now is because so many of us, and I would assume this includes everybody who's here on the live stream, those who watch the video, so many of us are being called to step into and to share the truth of who we are and what we know to be true, which is that, you know, we exist outside of time. That is who we are. That is our true nature. We are that which is timeless. And that recognition in and of itself activates this awareness in other people. And especially during this time now, where people are really feeling a lot of stress and anxiety around uncertainty and around, you know, what will happen? Will I be taken care of? You know, all these questions that people, you know, and obviously these are valid concerns, especially if you have, you know, parents and they've got kids at home and, you know, one of them or both of them have lost their jobs and all those things. You know, that I'm not diminishing any of that. That has its place. But what happens is, even in that kind of situation where you're thrown into this, you know, situation that could be unnerving and could be unsettling, when you are awake, when you have realized the self, then you trust the flow, you trust the movement, you trust the not knowing, and you trust out of that you will be taken care of. You know that something will happen to support and direct you to move in a way that is self-sufficient and it's supportive, and there will be a flow in to your life that you might not be seeing at this point in time. And this is why these kind of conversations and everything you've been doing, Lisa, is so vitally important at this time, because it's helping people navigate uncertainty. It's helping them to wake up to who they are. It's helping them to find a touchstone for that which doesn't come and go. It doesn't change. It doesn't shift. It's not wobbly and all over the place, which is, the energy of what's happening right now in the world is like, there's all this like crazy manic energy. And if you can find a way of connecting in with that which does not change and which is not affected by anything, in the outside world, then you're going to be okay no matter what. You'll be absolutely fine. You're going to be okay. Everything is okay. You are being taken care of. You will be taken care of. And, everything you need to see will be shown to you. And that might be that, in this kind of crazy time we're all kind of working through, that you're being called to find new ways of working or presenting yourself or generating income, or maybe working from home or having more family time, whatever that looks like for you. That is what this is all about in terms of this platform and other platforms that are kind of being made available for people. And I'm absolutely certain that a lot of what is happening is really about waking up to the truth of who we are and living in it, because it's easy to follow a spiritual community and follow teachings of a guru or a master and be able to quote him or her, and isn't it wonderful, I'm so blessed, but not actually taking those teachings to heart and to live from that place, and from that place of recognition that there is no difference between the guru or the master and the one who sees and recognizes those teachings as being true. It's the same truth. It's the same self. And the calling is to really step into that and own that. And that is why it's so important to look at what I call about sort of tripping points, those places and times in our life where we felt like, we don't quite fit in, or, we might be judged or ostracized. That was a big thing for me. I might get thrown out of the community if people find out that, I have these perceptions and that, have all these experiences with saints and great beings. I might be ostracized and, and it's not even that I was thinking that in my head, but there was something there inside at almost like a cellular level that was telling me, keep yourself safe. Don't be too out there. Watch what you say. Be guarded. Don't tell everybody.
Yeah, there's definitely what do I want to say? There's definitely an aspect of fear of, do I even tell people what I'm thinking or feeling? And something struck me when you're talking about, having this timeless experience. And there's been so many times in the last 4 to 6 weeks that my clients and even some of my family have said, I don't even know what time or day it is anymore, because we're all at home.
Yes.
And so I think that's a fascinating experiment.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Because the thing is, time is very much related to the mind. Time is a man-made construct. Mm-hmm. So time and mind are like twins. And to step essentially to step outside of the mind, or when you step outside of the mind, either through meditation or relaxation or being in nature, whatever it is, you're stepping out of the mind into that which is timeless. So, which is your true self, your true nature. So there's, and nobody has to take my word for it. You all have your own experiences, direct experiences of this, right? This isn't a Julie teaching. This is you with your own direct experience. And there's no coincidence that when we step outside of the mind, step into that which is timeless, then, any question we may have is answered, right? Because the thing is that the mind that generates a question isn't capable of giving, a complete answer. When we're looking for truth with a capital T, it is by stepping outside of the mind or outside of time when we receive the answer. And oftentimes, it'll, we might be in the kitchen chopping vegetables or something, but you switch off, you get so tired of like going over the same ground or trying to sort of figure something out, or you ask 20 people and they tell you different, they give you 10 different answers. Not that I've been very fortunate, and I realized that in a conversation I had with you last week or the week before. I realized, oh my God, I haven't been to a psychic or asked anybody anything, to do with life questions since before I got Shaktipat in 1989, because there's no need. But and I don't say that to brag. I say that because that need just falls away. You know what I mean? It's just becomes redundant. But the thing is that when we are willing to come out of the mind and step into that which is timeless, then whatever we need to know about anything is available. It's just right there.
Is that what they call? I remember reading about the Mahashunya, the void. Is that the same?
It's the same.
Okay.
It's the same. It's just a different descriptor for the same thing. Or the yogis call it. And this response I got was out of a question I had, actually. I was kind of asking myself, with respect, a client once said to me or wrote me an email and said, it's not possible for you to know what you know about me. How did you Google me? How did you find all this stuff out? I was like, if I really seriously had to Google, and I wasn't even sure what Google was then. I mean, that's how naive I was. This was like when I first started out, some years and years ago. And then I asked somebody and they told me, and then I said, jeepers, if I really had to do that, I really, really wouldn't. I don't have the time, honestly, to be looking on Google and trying to like figure out something out to say to somebody. But anyway, so that question's come up a lot. How is it possible? It's just not possible. So, and I never know what to say. What am I supposed to say to that? And my answer always is the same. Well, ahead of any session, I say my prayers. I do puja to the beings that have given me initiation and have, given me teachings. And I say to them, listen, I know nothing. You have to tell me what to say. And I trust what I receive. And then I just say it, and I say it as directly without any kind of filters. So that question has been asked me many times. So because of that, because the question kept coming up, one day, just before I did my prayers and my puja, I asked, how is this information known? I keep being asked this question. How do you know this? How is this information known? And then one of the great beings said to me, you go into the heart of the great heart. You go into the heart of the great heart and you receive the information from there. So I wrote that down. And then later, I was like, what is the heart of the great heart? What is that? What does that mean? And then what happened was, through a series of direct experiences, I began to understand that what this great being was pointing to was, in another way of describing it would be to be going into the heart of source itself.
Mm.
And that is where all the great beings abide. That is their home. It's the same. It's only one self. There's only one self. So it doesn't matter whether you're a Christian, a Buddhist, a Sufi. That is the place, the heart of the great heart, or the heart of source itself, that we go into collectively, actually, when we receive inspiration, when we receive the answers to our questions, when we receive a flash of inspiration, like, Lisa, create this summit. You can do it.
Yes.
Or Raquel, here's another one. Raquel, study. You have to study for your master's or PhD or what, whatever that is. We're in that space. That is where we, and the thing is that what is really worth recognizing is, in that moment when we receive it, it's so all-knowing and so all-pervasive. There's a complete recognition that is absolute truth itself, because you just feel it in your whole body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what has happened is, to be in that space, to receive, we have stepped outside of time, i.e. outside of mind, and we are in the self. And actually, you're always the self. You're never anything but the self. But what happens is we move, into the mind, and then we kind of like, get constrained and contracted, in the mind's noise.
Mm-hmm.
But, to receive anything in that way means that we've stepped outside of time and outside of mind, which is our natural home, which is where we receive, whatever we're being gifted with.
I love that. That's interesting, because my process when I'm getting information also is very I always start by seeing a timeline of all time, and I pull in all the time to this point and all the time from the future and come into this space of present moment. And that's when I seem to blast off into this empty space.
Yes.
And to me, that's my experience with Akashic Records. That's my experience with that information. So I love how you're talking about it, because that's exactly, it's all the same, right? And that's exactly what I experience as I pull into this space that comes out of those timelines.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So amazing.
It's just, we're really kind of describing the same thing. It's just a different way of doing it. And the reason this discussion has so much value for the people that are listening is because they are doing the same thing, and they always have done the same thing, right? But, maybe in a different way. But everyone finds his or her way of connecting into the void, into absolute awareness itself, or, whatever term you have for that which really cannot be defined, which is free and limitless. We all have our ways of connecting in, and oftentimes we've done that since the day we were born, because essentially it'd be very hard to go through life without having some connection with, that which cannot be sort of defined. Even with an atheist, they may have different words or, a different way of describing it, and definitely wouldn't sort of include anything to do with God or spirit or anything. But there's something that we all have to connect in with to find, inspiration or solace or whatever it is we need, in any given moment. So the beauty of, what we're describing here is really about recognizing what we've always done, recognizing our tripping points in terms of, thinking that we're weird, and really coming into a place of acceptance of ourselves and really a celebration of ourselves as well. Because, all the challenges we've had to face, all the conflicts we've had to deal with, all of that really plays its part in terms of showing us how true we are to our own higher self. Are we willing to discount, for example, an intuition that we're given, or a sign that we're given, or a message that we're given, just because we're afraid, what people might think, or, that's too scary, do I have the courage to do this? Because all of these things are really important if we want to be true to who we are and to live a life that is completely aligned with the truth of who we are, rather than, actually trying to live a very unsatisfying life by not fully revealing, all our gifts, skills, and talents, and living on purpose.
So
and I know, it's, look, here's the thing as well is I know that my vitality is just through the roof. I always had really high energy as, when I was younger, but, my energy is so high. And it has been it's expanded even more, really, just very dynamically over the last 3 or 4 weeks since responding to your invitation to sit in this place and to share.
I love that. Here's the thing, Julie, is it's been a hell of a 15 years for me. And I did not do that work alone. You were a huge, huge part of that. And through that work, so many of the facilitators in the summit and the guests on my show and are people that have been a huge part of me becoming who I am today. And I feel absolutely compelled to share you all with everyone, because everyone is in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want anyone to do it alone, because it's hard. You cannot go through a journey of self-realization alone. You can, I shouldn't say you can't, but I remember His Holiness the Dalai Lama saying it was like a one-off conversation in the middle of a teaching that it was like the beginning of the teaching. So it was like a preliminary thing. So there was only a couple thousand people there instead of like 50,000. And he said, listen, like anyone can go sit in a cave and chant mantras. And he said, but that is not going to teach you the true nature of the mind. And it's not going to help you develop an understanding of the mind. And he said, you need to go out into your life and learn the science of your mind and the nature of reality to self-realize. And he was very clear about that. And that's what we're all doing.
Yes.
And I think the more tools and the more support we can have, the better. And that's really what's driving me. What's driving me is there were times where I felt alone. And there were times where it was 3 a.m. and I was near death and I couldn't pick up the phone and call you in the Bahamas. And, I had nothing to depend on but YouTube videos of the Dalai Lama. That is all I had to live off of some of that time. And if the best thing that I can do for our planet and everybody listening is get you guys on these platforms so that we are not alone.
Yes, because it's really tough. And, and certainly it's a lot better now than when I was, a lot younger.
Yeah.
That was really hard because, you couldn't go online. There weren't many books about anything. it was really challenging, and it really heightened that feeling of being weird and being isolated and not understanding anything, and it was very, very difficult, very difficult. And then, as my destiny would have it, I was brought to the Bahamas. And, again, that was very challenging because I was put into, high schools here in Nassau, where the kind of the fundamental belief and drive was in, a Baptist faith, or a, very sort of, organized Christian belief system, that, you didn't dare go outside of, what the priest or the minister said. And so, I was very careful about who I spoke to and what I said. But one of the gifts of this as well was that I learned to utilize language that was accessible for other people. So, instead of talking about the Shakti, I would talk about the Holy Spirit. And that was a great lesson and a great teaching for me, that it's really about right use of language that, really helps you create inroads, so that you're actually speaking about the same thing, actually, is what it is, rather than building walls and, talking about chakras and things that, people like, ah! So, but, essentially, it's really about just waking up to the truth of who you are. That's the bottom line. Waking up, looking at every single experience in your life, no matter how difficult, as an opportunity to see, what are the lessons you're learning from that experience. And again, how true are you to what you know to be true? Or do you just drop it and give it up, and look for distractions?
Yeah. Well, before I get some parting words, I can't believe we could talk for hours, I feel. But one thing my own experience in the last 4 weeks that I want to share, because it's so much a part of this, is something clicked in me in yet another profound awakening. Although I'd argue this is probably the most radical one I've had, and I've had some crazy stuff. But one of the profound things that happened to me in the last 4 weeks was, all of a sudden, I realized that my indigo nature, being an indigo child, I always understood I was one. I got that, I thought. But what I realized is my weird, like the need, the drive to connect with nature, the authoritative, like I didn't like authority figures. I was very anti that. I'm left-handed. My second grade teacher did not want me to write with my left hand, to the point that I was in pain trying to write with my right hand. I mean, all of these things, it clicked with me in the last 4 weeks. Like, that's actually the best part of me, is that I've sought the truth. I do not accept anything else except for truth, with a capital T. And all of these weird things actually make perfect sense. And so it's so important to embrace who you are, because that reveals your mission. It's like, suddenly I'm so clear of what I'm supposed to do, because it's like, oh, I see what all this was for.
Yes.
I get why I'm this way. Like, duh. It seems silly when you think of it, but that's part of that awakening, is like, all of a sudden you see clearly why all these things were the way they were.
Yes.
I mean, I didn't even want to work a Monday through Friday job. Like, I'm very anti all those things. And I'm like, oh, I see. I wasn't supposed to be doing all that.
Yes. And, all of this is about really being in integrity with yourself. And you can only be in integrity with yourself is if you honor your weird. And you come into some sort of mutual understanding and respect for it, rather than feeling conflicted or, thinking there's nothing you can do about it, or, whatever the story might be. And, it's really important. It's important, even if you have come into a kind of recognition and an understanding and you embrace it and all of those things, it's still important to look back in your life from when you were a child and look at those like points or periods or those times when you had this feeling that you were different or you were weird or you didn't fit in or whatever the storyline was, and look at what was going on, because that really speaks to you stepping outside of time and having this very direct experience of the higher self or source or whatever you want to call it, and living from that place. So it all has great value.
It's amazing. And it feels great to
Yes.
embrace things. It's joyful.
And you're, in look, it's kind of a bit like recapitulation that shamans do that. They look back through their life, and you're actually restoring energy, even if it was just subtle, even if you feel like you've healed it. When you look back and honor it and recognize it and realize, that was what was going on, you are restoring that energy into your field that suddenly becomes available to you. And you can honor and remember that, 7-year-old, like for me, who couldn't tell time and felt dumb and was telling herself, she's dumb, I'm dumb, I can't do math, all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you again, Julie. Another great conversation. Always.
You're so welcome. This is always great fun. I love it.
Me too. I mean, it really is so fun. I could just do it forever. So thank you for being on, and for everybody listening. I have one more podcast tonight with Eve Crow sharing her experiences as a shaman. And we have another summit this weekend, and you still have time to register at oneheartoneearth.net. And this summit, we have 12 hours of material just on Saturday.
We get to move.
Oh, we get to move. And I'll tell you what, I'm really excited about block therapy. Rachel shared block therapy in our last summit, and Deanna Hansen, the founder of block therapy, is going to be teaching how to build immunity with a partner and do body work with a partner this weekend. And I got my block, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago. And it's profound how it impacts the body. I'm like blown away. And it was the very next step with my yoga practice. So I'm really excited. But we have Tibetan frequency class. We have a gal who's going to teach how to heal with the Akashic records. So rather than reading, how to heal with them. We have Kundalini yoga. I'm teaching compassionate yoga. We have gentle yoga. And I just want everybody to know that it's very accessible. So if you've never done yoga or any of these body therapy practices, it's totally okay. Like, it's very accessible. The teachers are accessible, and you're going to be able to do it. And even if you just watch and take it in, but it's going to be really, really incredible. We also have a Pilates instructor who's built a very particular flow just for this summit. And so that's going to be really exciting too. So get ready to move energy out, since we've all been sitting in our houses for 4 weeks.
Especially in the Bahamas. We're on yet another lockdown. That means we've had so many. But hey, great. I'm not complaining. Seriously, it's all good.
Yeah, as long as we're all safe, as long as I can get on my yoga mat, I'm pretty good. And you don't need a lot of room for that, thank goodness. So I've been doing a lot of that in my house and stretching and putting my legs on the wall and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it does. It makes a huge difference.
It really does. It's 85 degrees today in Colorado. So it's warm and sunny.
Actually, it's probably warmer than here, because here we've had a bit of weather. It's very cloudy and windy.
That's so crazy. It's high in almost 90 on Friday. It's supposed to be in Colorado. So summer came fast. So we're not totally locked down, which is nice. So we're able to get outside, but we're still not going anywhere really. So
No. Well, it's good.
it is. Thank you guys so much for listening and for tuning in, and for all of you who watched the live and your comments and your shares. I love it. And keep them coming, you guys. You can share your comments on YouTube. You can also share your comments if you're listening to the iTunes or Spotify podcast. You can go to @Buddhist Biohacker on either Instagram or Facebook, and you can share your comments and your experiences there. I know Julie and I would love to hear from you and hear your shares about what makes you weird, and what your thoughts are and what you're thinking and feeling. And the last but not least, I just want to say thank you to my partners who have been so great. So for Purity Coffee, if you're looking for really clean coffee, Purity is the way to go. And it's a husband and wife team that created this coffee, and the wife believes that her cancer was cured because of this coffee. It's the highest antioxidant. So use code Enlightenment Pie to save 10% off your first order. And I also want to say thank you to Dry Farm Wines. They also, no sugar, no sulfites, no mycotoxins. I barely drink alcohol really ever. I've hardly ever drank, to be honest. But I haven't been able to enjoy wine for about 10 years because of my food allergies and mold and sugar and all of that. I can drink this wine. It doesn't bother me. I don't get headaches because it's very little to no sugar and low sulfites and stuff. Not only there's no candida reaction. I mean, it's really, I cannot say enough about it. And you can get a penny bottle, so a bottle for a penny, if you go to dryfarmwines.com/Buddhist Biohacker. So that's another way you can connect. So I just want to say thank you to both of them, because I only pick products that I really believe in, and they're not only great partners, but they're great products. And if you have a lot of sensitivities, like most of us empaths do, these are the products to go. So I just wanted to say thank you to them too, because they've been so supportive. So thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here always. And Julie will be back on Friday. And I'm very excited about that, because we're talking about darshan. And I don't think that that's probably something that folks even think about. And so I really wanted to bring this to the forefront. So I'm really excited for you to talk about that, Julie.
Me too. Thank you.
Mwah.
Mwah.
Goodbye. Bye to everybody.
Bye.